Anytime the weather changes, you need to be prepared. Basically have the rations for the inside of the house and the four-wheeler for outside. Hey, welcome to this edition of Road Warrior. I'm your host, Grant Roberson. Now behind me is one vehicle I've followed for decades and really have fallen in love with it. And for 2017, there's a few changes. If you don't recognize this vehicle from the outside, don't be surprised. This is the redesigned 2017 Nissan Armada. Now for 2016, this vehicle kind of disappeared, and prior to that, it pretty much went unchanged, and that was the style vehicle I truly fell in love with. Now with this evolution here, we've stepped it up even further. Now don't be confused, the QX80 from Infiniti has a lot of strong similarities to this, and we'll get into that in just a second, but the Armada really keeps the Nissan line separate and really is a nice blend between the two models. So what is the biggest change for 2017 straight off the bat? The profile. Now looking at the QX80, one vehicle I also love quite a lot. That is considered somewhat of a behemoth, very beluga-like well, and well, this one takes some styling cues. Now what they did for the Armada is soften it around the edges just a little bit, and from the profile you truly see that nice curvature here and there. Now the big difference with the QX80, I think in the front it has a little bit more voluptuous, a little bit more curves. Here they do keep some of the truck-like lines, which is a big draw for a lot of the people that like this vehicle. Now sweeping down, you can definitely tell it keeps its lane prowess, really massive lines. Now there isn't a lot of curvaceousness down the side. I like the fact that they keep it nice and tight, specifically even around the haunches, nothing really bellowing out, really just nice tight lines. What they really did do is soften the chiseling like look and really took the truck like appeal and well, just subdued it just a hair. When Nissan redesigned the Armada, they definitely took some styling points from the QX80, but they had to stop short because they didn't want to blur the line too much, really bringing in too much Infiniti and forget about, well, their Nissan base. What they did is kept that guerrilla warfare, something you see across the entire Nissan lineup when it comes to their truck models, the Titan, the Frontier. Now what I like is, well, that differentiates it again from the QX80. If you look at the QX80, that has again a more voluptuous front end, very curved, beluga well-ish, nothing bad, I really digged it, but the whole grille definitely wasn't truck-ish, a lot more regal. What you see here is what you're going to see on a lot of the Nissan trucks, really rugged, and this kind of gives it a dual personality. From the profile, very regal, very subtle. From the front end, very growling, and you can tell right from the start, nice black grille, coupled with the bright chrome and of course the Nissan emblem. Everything else is pretty much body color all the way around. We do go more with a brushed accent down low. A lot of airflow right through the middle and somewhat stylized headlights, nothing too aggressive like we see on the QX80, really just truckish and straightforward. One area where the Armada truly shines is in its overall size, definitely giving you full-size numbers. Wheelbase stretched about 121 inches, overall length about 208 inches, easily into that full-size market. Now when you look at the height, it's going to be just over 6 feet, but really when it comes to width, pushing about 80 inches wide, truly taking up that whole lane. Now another important feature really is ground clearance. On a day like this with all the snow and basically trying to maneuver even on the city streets, you definitely want to have some extra height. What you have here is around about 9.1 inches either on the two-wheel drive or four-wheel drive model. When you have snowy conditions, one thing you want is grip at the four corners, and that starts with the tread. Specifically what we have here is the 275/60s wrapping a 20-inch wheel. What we also had was four-wheel drive. Real easy to select using the knob on the inside, choosing between auto, 4 high, 4 low, and even a button for snow. All that coupled together gave us tons of grip. What we also liked was the choice of rims. Instead of the matching chrome we see around the vehicle, they went with a darker black accent, really giving us a smoky kind of appearance at the four corners. One thing to note about these huge wheel wells is they do collect a lot of the grime off the road, specifically the ice and snow, and it all collects right in through here. Now these are slight caverns, and what you'd be amazed is how blocky and heavy this actually becomes. By no means do you actually want to kick this with your foot, because you can definitely break your toe because, well, it's not budging. What you really need to do is just take a little rubber hammer, maybe tap it just a hair, and it'll eventually come out. Definitely want to keep these clear because they do get interference here with the tire, making driving just less fun. Now what we also notice is with the step rail here, There's going to be a collection of lights the same. Now these are all standard things that are going to happen during these conditions. You just want to note that you're going to want to clear those off. As you sweep down the vehicle, one thing to talk about is right up here in these nice portholes. They look nice and stylized, but they are operational, allowing this engine to escape some of that heat, keeping it nice and cool. Another thing to note really is the breakaway mirrors and the surround view cameras, really giving you cameras on all sides, allowing you to get in those tight niches. After all, there's really not a small turning radius on this vehicle. Another thing to note is the matching chrome accents up here. I'd argue maybe to subdue those just a little bit. What we also want to talk about is ingress into this vehicle, and I've talked about it 1,000 times now. Pretty much the smart key systems, leaving it in your pocket, forget about it, allowing you to really access it. And we talked about the 20 different ways vehicles are doing it, sometimes with your finger. In this case, it's just simply a button. You press it once, press it again. It's going to unlock, make life so much simpler. What's even better is security at the fill up. One thing I really note on all vehicles is, well, how does it work? In this particular case, it actually locks with the vehicle. When the vehicle is locked, the fill up area will be locked just the same. When you want to actually fill up, make sure the vehicle's unlocked, it will pop right open. Now, one thing that needs to evolve also is the capless-like systems. Pretty much this is going to be the old school method. The reason for that, I want to get rid of it, is how many of us had that engine light come on because you didn't re-secure this just right. I like to get rid of these altogether, pretty much go capless. We won't have that problem. Swinging around to the business end of the Armada, first let's look at the design. First thing you'll notice is really the huge amount of glass back here, trying to give you about as much visibility as possible. Also, you're going to see tons of body color, really coupled with this nice chrome accent to match the rest of the vehicle. What you also see is a huge oversized spoiler, really giving you a nice profile. Now, one thing I like to do is have them take this windshield wiper, put the operation up underneath here, something you've seen on the Tahoe. What that's going to allow this windshield to do is actually become operational. Something that's a little bit more old school in SUVs, but something I think they should bring back. Now, there's of course safety back here. You're going to have the backup camera, you're going to have backup sensors, really allow you to get this massive vehicle into tight spots. What you also see is the operation of things like the tow hitch is hidden. Again, the competition is doing this, and we have a nice rubberized surface here. Overall, because all this is nice and rubber and that typical fascia, when the snow collects, simply come up, give it a little bit of banging, it's all going to fall off. Now let's look at the rear hatch. First thing, of course, is it's huge and oversized. What that's going to allow you to do is gain easy access into a broad open area. Now, as for the operation, this particular model, nice and powered, using the key fob or the button there. What that's going to give you is decent room. Behind the third row, around about 16 cubic feet. Behind the second row, around about 50. And with everything laid flat, around about 95 cubic feet total. Now we already got quite a bit of gear in here, all positioned here where the back right passenger could be. Now, to make life easier, you can really transition this vehicle, which is a key word when it comes to SUVs, transitioning between cargo and people. And they make that again on this particular model so much easier. No pulling on handles. Instead, you can simply use the corresponding buttons here on the side wall. As for the left side, simply push it forward. Now, it does take just a few seconds for it to lay flat, but once it does, it's going to give you again a nice huge cargo floor. Again, about 50 cubic feet of space. So that's truly going to come in handy, especially if you don't have any people to haul, but tons of cargo. With a vehicle this big, you definitely have to have a powerhouse under the hood, and Nissan delivers, specifically with a 5.6 liter V8 engine. That's going to deliver around about 390 horses and 394 foot-pounds of torque. That's up from last year, which was around about 385. Now, what they also did is couple this engine with a 7-speed automatic transmission. That compared to last year's 5-speed automatic. Now, with all this grip at the four corners and nice power in the hood, the towing capacity's not too shabby either. Around about 8,500 pounds of towing, really meaning you can take all the people and their toys to the lake. First thing to talk about when you climb inside the Armada is really getting into the captain's chair, because first thing you'll notice is the leather appointment on this particular model and the pillow-like feel. The other thing is that center console, really giving you tons of elbow support and really making it comfortable for those long rides. As for legroom numbers, you're going to find the first and second row to be almost identical, around about 41 inches. What does that mean? Well, the third row is going to come in quite tight at about 28 inches of legroom space. The legroom numbers are more than obvious when you get into the second row because that space in between the seat back and the back seats is so plentiful. Now, what you're also going to notice in this particular model was the dual captain chairs there in the second row. Now, what did that mean? Well, you had an oversized center console, pretty much meaning the middle aisle, well, is gone. Instead, replaced with a nice oversized elbow support and some dual cup holders. What we also found is entertainment. Dual screens built into the headrest really kept the little ones nice and happy. With that center console, it's going to be difficult to climb into the third row, definitely through the middle. So instead, you got to use the outside access. And the way you do that is fairly easy. There's a handle here on the shoulder. All you do is pull that once and the second row tumbles forward. Now, once it does that, it makes quick ingress into the third row. One thing you'll notice is a nice little step-in height right there. But as you climb inside, nice bench styling. Now, you also see that the headrests are tucked down, but once your people get in place, they'll put that up. The reason they tuck out of the way is to give you better visibility out that back window. What you also notice in the very back is dual cup holders, one on each side of the vehicle, pretty much meaning everyone can bring in their favorite beverages, well, and even have a spare. To keep the third row occupants from complaining, those adjustable seats we mentioned earlier, well, they're accommodating here by the passengers. They can simply recline that with the press of a button, making it, well, a little bit more enjoyable since the legroom numbers are going to be somewhat tight. To keep the occupants in the back nice and comfortable, they first have heated seats for the second row and, of course, their own controls for the climate. Now, what's great is the vents aren't found here in the middle nor on the pillars, but instead in the ceiling. That pretty much means the airflow is going to be nice and quick and get to the back row fairly easily, meaning everyone gets nice and comfortable for the long rides. To connect to the entertainment system, you can find the connectivity way down low in the back of the front center console. Over here on the far left is the good old standard power outlet. However, it's only a 2-prong, not a 3-prong. You also have a power supply in the middle and a composite connection there on the far right side. The only thing I couldn't find was the good old HDMI connection, which a lot of the devices are using today. To keep this vehicle looking nice and sleek, they've added an extra covering for the cup holders in other areas. Now, what you do is just press it out of the way and you'll find 2 cup holders, nice little another niche, some coin areas, and a power supply. Way low on the dash, what you'll find is selector knobs for heating and cooling both front occupant seats. And what I like is the dial selector can stay in place, pretty much meaning it's always going to be that way. So for a particular season, if you always like your seat heated or cooled, simply dial it in and it'll be that way every time you get in the vehicle. There's no touchscreen system here, and that's because, well, it's an arm stretch away and probably the likelihood of you using it is slim. Instead, they make tons of buttons for you to get used to. Really, the top really being for navigation and routing yourself around, down below for the entertainment. Now, this does take a little bit of memorization, but even better, a lot of the functionality is found here on the steering wheel. Again, this vehicle has a tri-zone system, and up front the dual zones come into play really with the temperature select knobs on the both left and right. Nice and symmetric. As for fan speed, I prefer a knob instead of the buttons, but this works just the same. When it comes to the gauge clutch, there's going to be an analog tach and speedometer with a very minimal LCD display in the middle. That provides very limited information, and what I really like there is instead a nice digital readout for the speed. Now, it does it for this snowy edition of Road Warrior and our test drive behind the wheel of the 2017 Nissan Armada. Now, the exterior has totally gone through an evolution, really mimicking a little bit of the QX80, but truly holding to that truckish line, specifically with that guerrilla warfare. Now, they've definitely delivered under that hood, giving you a lot of pep in your step, regardless of how big the vehicle could feel behind the wheel. It definitely is light on its feet. What it also delivers is that 3 rows of comfort, and this particular model really stepping up the level of entertainment. Now, as always, thank you for watching this edition of Road Warrior. Keep both hands on the wheel and eyes straight ahead.